The night shift on Unity Point Station was supposed to be quiet. Commander Kim Juno preferred it that way. She sat at her console, sipping cold coffee while monitoring the deep space sensors. Same boring routine for the past 3 years. Stars, twinkling in the distance. Empty space stretching forever. Nothing but silence from the void. That's why the signal shocked her so much. "What the hell?" she muttered, staring at her screen. The computer was going crazy, showing patterns it had never seen before. Numbers, symbols, and strange frequencies all jumbled together. She hit the alert button. Captain Park Doyen stumbled onto the bridge, still pulling on his uniform. "What's wrong, Juno?" "Sir, we're getting something weird. Look at this." She pointed to the readings. "It's not random noise. There's a pattern here. Someone's trying to say something." Park rubbed his eyes. "From where? That's the crazy part. It's coming from way out there. Edge of the galaxy. The signal's been traveling for centuries, maybe longer." Dr. Lee Sana arrived next, her lab coat stained with coffee. As the station's best language expert, she knew 37 human languages and had studied every alien communication theory ever written. Too bad they'd never actually found any aliens until now. "Let me see," Sana said, pushing her glasses up. She studied the patterns for a moment, then gasped. "Oh my God. This isn't random. These are mathematical proofs, basic number sequences. Someone's trying to teach us their language." The team worked for hours. Slowly, painfully, they began to understand fragments of the message. What they found made their blood run cold. "Help" was the first word they decoded. Then slaves. Then dying. The signal contained star maps showing a path of destruction across the galaxy. Worlds stripped bare, civilizations enslaved. An enemy called the Harvesters moving from system to system like a plague. Chief Navigator Choi Minho plotted their course on the holodisplay. "If this is accurate, they'll be here in about 50 years. The message became clearer as they worked. The beings who sent it described themselves as a proud species reduced to living tools. They'd been broadcasting their plea for help for 800 years. Nobody had answered. "They're begging someone, anyone, to save them," Sana whispered, tears in her eyes. "They know they're doomed, but they're still hoping someone will care enough to respond." Park studied the tactical data. The Harvesters sounded like nothing humanity had ever imagined. Living ships that adapted in battle, weapons that turned victims into more weapons, a hive mind that consumed entire worlds. "Sir," Juno said quietly, "every species in their path was destroyed or enslaved. No survivors. No resistance that lasted more than a few days." The bridge fell silent. Humanity had built a nice little civilization among the stars. 50 colonies, trade routes, peaceful exploration. They'd never faced anything worse than pirates or the occasional asteroid. Now they were looking at pure evil heading their way. "What do we do?" Minho asked. Park looked at each face on his bridge. Good people. Smart people. Brave people. But were they enough? "We answer the call," he said finally. "We let them know help is coming." "Sir, with respect, we don't even know if we can fight these things," Juno protested. "Then we learn, we prepare, we do whatever it takes." Park's voice grew stronger. Someone finally heard their cry for help. "We're not going to let them down." Dr. Sana started typing. "What should we say?" "Keep it simple," Park decided. "We received your message. We're coming. Hold on." As the response signal fired toward the distant stars, carrying humanity's first message to aliens, the crew didn't realize they were starting something bigger than a conversation. They were beginning a war that would transform humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. The aliens had asked for help against monsters. They were about to learn that sometimes the scariest thing in the universe is someone willing to become a monster to save you. 50 years to prepare. 50 years to build weapons, ships, and strategies. 50 years to turn a peaceful species into something that could face the Harvesters. The countdown had begun, and somewhere in the dark between stars, an ancient distress call finally had an answer. The silence was broken. For the first time in Centuries, the enslaved species wasn't alone. Help was coming. The question was, what would humanity become in order to deliver it? The signal faded into space, carrying hope to the desperate and a promise that would reshape the galaxy. Humanity had heard the call. Now they would show the universe what that meant. The age of silence was over. The age of war was about to begin. The emergency meeting room on Luna Station had never seen anything like this. Representatives from every human colony, military leaders, scientists and politicians sat around a massive table. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew why they were here, but nobody wanted to believe it. Admiral Yang Hana stood at the front, her uniform perfectly pressed despite the sleepless nights. She'd been humanity's top military strategist for 30 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. "The alien signal has been verified," she began, her voice steady. "We've checked it 17 different ways. It's real. They're real. And they're coming." She pressed a button, and the room filled with a holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked dead systems. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Every red dot was once a living civilization. Now they're gone, harvested. The enemy moves in a predictable pattern, consuming everything in their path. Defense Minister Kwon Seojin leaned forward. "How long do we have?" "Our best estimate, 45 to 50 years. The room erupted. Voices rose in panic, argument and disbelief. Admiral Yang waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "Some of you think this might be a hoax. I wish you were right. But our deep space telescopes have confirmed it. We've detected massive energy signatures moving through the spiral arm. 17 systems have already gone dark this decade alone." Dr. Bae Yujin, head of advanced research, stood up. "What are we talking about in terms of response? Traditional warfare won't work against what they've described." "That's correct," Yang agreed. "We need to completely rethink everything we know about fighting. These harvesters use biological technology, living ships that heal themselves, weapons that learn and adapt. We're not just fighting an army. We're fighting evolution itself." The president of Earth leaned back in his chair. "The economic impact alone would be staggering. You're talking about converting our entire civilization into a war machine." "With respect, sir," Yang replied, "we won't have a civilization to worry about if we lose." Chief Engineer Park Hyunwoo pulled up technical specifications. "I've been reviewing the data from the signal. The aliens included fragments of their science. Some of it is beyond us, but we might be able to adapt certain principles." "Like what?" asked Colonial Governor Im Nayan. "Energy shielding that responds to organic matter, quantum processors that can interface with biological systems, weapon designs that, well, they look more like viruses than bullets." The room fell quiet. Everyone understood what he meant. "We're talking about becoming like them," said Minister Kwon quietly. "No," Admiral Yang corrected. "We're talking about becoming whatever we need to become to win." The debate went on for hours. Some argued for evacuation. Others wanted to try diplomacy. A few suggested hiding and hoping the harvesters would pass by. Finally, old General Jo Seo-kun spoke up. He'd been quiet through most of the meeting, just listening. "I fought in the colony wars. I've seen what desperation can make people do. But this isn't about us anymore. It's about every human who'll be born in the next century." He stood slowly, his age showing. "Those aliens have been screaming for help for 800 years. Nobody came. Now they're probably all dead or wish they were. We have a chance to be different. We have a chance to be the answer someone prays for." The vote was closer than anyone expected, but humanity chose war. Within weeks, the transformation began. Shipyards that built pleasure craft started producing warships. Research centers abandoned peaceful projects to focus on weapons. Military academies expanded, and recruitment drives promised adventure while hiding the truth. They were training an entire generation to die. Children too young to understand became part of war games. Schools taught tactical thinking alongside mathematics. The media showed heroic films about brave soldiers while quietly censoring reports about casualty estimates. Dr. Lee Sana worked with a team of linguists to craft humanity's response to the alien signal. They kept it simple. "We received your message. We are coming. Hold on." As that message traveled through space, Admiral Yang began the largest mobilization in human history. Every resource, every innovation, every life would be dedicated to this coming war. "We have one advantage," she told her staff. "They don't know we exist yet. We have time to prepare, to become something they've never encountered before." Commander Kim Juno, now promoted to Special Operations, asked, "What if we become something we don't recognize?" Yang looked out at the stars, knowing the harvesters were out there, getting closer each day. "Then we'll deal with that problem if we survive to see it." The economic transformation was brutal but swift. Luxury goods vanished. Entertainment focused on building morale. Every human colony became a military outpost. Peace became a memory. Scientists worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Engineers designed weapons that made previous wars look like playground scuffles. Strategists planned battles across light years. But the most important change was cultural. Humanity was becoming something harder, colder, more focused. The gentle species that had spread peacefully among the stars was dying. In its place, something deadlier was being born. As the years passed, the changes became irreversible. Children grew up knowing only war preparation. Adults lived for the coming battle. The elderly shared stories of a peaceful time that felt like myth. 45 years to build an army capable of fighting living nightmares. 45 years to transform an entire species. 45 years to prepare for the galaxy's first meeting between humans and aliens. Nobody knew if it would be enough. But they knew one thing for certain. When the harvesters arrived, they wouldn't find the same humanity that had received the signal. They'd find something much, much worse. 47 years. That's how long humanity had to prepare. The first scout reported the harvesters right on schedule, exactly where the models predicted they'd be. Commander Park Ji-hyun watched her monitoring station screens light up with impossible readings. They're not ships," she whispered into her comm. "They're alive." The footage from the outer rim was horrifying. The harvesters traveled in what looked like giant sea creatures made of metal and flesh. Their ships pulsed with veins of light, growing and shifting as they moved. Weapons fired from openings that looked more like mouths than gun ports. Colony Alpha 7 went silent first. The last transmission was just screaming. Fleet Admiral Oh Sun-min stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, watching the tactical displays. 47 years of preparation had led to this moment. The human fleet was unlike anything that had existed before. Ships with quantum armor, weapons that could rewrite reality, and crews trained for a war everyone hoped would never come. "All ships report ready," his aide announced. "Launch the first wave," Sun-min ordered. The battle began at the edge of the Proxima system. Human ships emerged from stealth, their new technology finally tested in real combat. The harvesters reacted instantly. Their bioships twisted and evolved, adapting to each new threat within seconds. Lieutenant Colonel Im Woo-jin led the first kamikaze squadron. These weren't desperate last stands. This was planned tactics. Human consciousness could be downloaded and transferred. Death was no longer permanent. "Remember," Woo-jin broadcast to his pilots, "we're not just dying for humanity. We're showing these things what humans do when we're angry." The first collision took out 3 harvester bioships, but the creatures learned. The next wave had adapted, grown harder shells, developed new defenses. Captain Kang Hyeri commanded the experimental ship Reaper. Her vessel carried the most disturbing weapon humanity had created: neural disruptors that attacked the harvesters' shared consciousness. "Fire," she ordered. The harvesters' formation suddenly broke apart. Their coordinated attacks became chaos as the hive mind fractured. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the harvesters experienced confusion. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, both sides had lost ships, but something had changed. The harvesters had stopped advancing. "Status report," Sun-min demanded. "Sir, they're studying us." Tactical Officer Lee Myung reported. Long-range sensors show them analyzing debris from our ships. The harvesters had encountered other species before. They'd learned to overcome any defense, adapt to any weapon. But humanity was different. These new enemies used tactics the harvesters had never seen. The humans had uploaded minds into weapons, turning consciousness into ammunition. They used quantum entanglement to make ships that could exist in multiple places at once. They'd created viruses that could infect living technology. But most disturbing of all, they fought with deliberate cruelty. Destroyer Captain Nam Minhyun deployed the first bioweapon. It didn't just kill harvesters. It made them suffer first. Their shared consciousness meant every death was felt by all. "Sir, we're reading panic responses from their fleet," reported the sensors officer. "Good," Minhyun replied coldly. "Let them know what fear feels like." Admiral Yang Hana watched the reports from command. The harvesters were pulling back, regrouping. This had never happened before in their recorded history. "They're scared," she realized. Her aide looked confused. "Scared. But they're winning. They've destroyed 12 colonies. And we've done something to them that nobody else ever has." Yang explained. "We've made them bleed." The war changed after Proxima. The harvesters adapted, but so did humanity. Each battle became more brutal, more innovative. Both sides pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Scientist Dr. Bae Yujin developed weapons that could think independently. Engineer Park Hyun-woo created ships that could rebuild themselves using enemy wreckage. Commander Ryu Won-young led missions that were less like battles and more like hunts. The galaxy watched in horror and fascination. Humanity was holding the line against creatures that had destroyed civilizations for millennia. But the cost was visible in every human survivor. They were becoming something harder, colder, more ruthless. "We're changing," Dr. Lee Sana observed during a brief piece. "Every battle makes us less human." "Good," Admiral Yang replied. Human wasn't enough to beat them. The front lines stabilized after 5 years of constant warfare. The harvesters had learned to fear human tactics. Humans had learned to think like their enemies. Veterans like Colonel Lim Tae-hoon started calling it the Long March, the slow, grinding war of attrition that would decide everything. "We're not just fighting them," Tae-hoon explained to new recruits. "We're out-evolving them. Every battle, we become more dangerous. Every defeat teaches us something new." The war had become a race. Who could adapt faster, who could become more ruthless, who could push further into darkness. The harvesters had created perfect predators. Humanity was becoming something worse. Years passed. The front moved back and forth. Neither side could achieve decisive victory. But everyone knew the real battle wasn't over territory. It was over who would survive to see the end. The long march continued. And with each day, humanity marched further from what they had been. The question wasn't whether they would win. The question was whether anything human would remain when the war finally ended. 3 years into the war, Scout Captain Nam In-seo made a discovery that changed everything. His ship picked up strange readings from a dead system, ruins that predated human civilization by thousands of years. The archaeological team led by Dr. Song Aryam worked carefully through the alien ruins. "What they found in the ancient archives made their blood run cold, Captain," Aryam reported, her voice shaking. "This civilization sent a distress signal identical to the one we received. Same mathematical patterns, same desperate plea for help. The records showed a proud species called the Veltai, who had built beautiful cities and explored their solar system peacefully. They'd detected the harvesters coming and broadcast their SOS for 300 years. No one had answered. The Veltai archives detailed their final days. How they watched their world burn. How their children were taken as slaves. How they died hoping someone somewhere had heard their call for help and would remember them. We found 12 more civilizations, reported xenoarchaeologist Dr. Kim Seojin a month later. All sent the same signal. None received a response. The weight of this discovery crushed some researchers. but it transformed others into something harder. Supreme Commander Young Hana stood before the Human War Council, her expression carved from stone. Every species in the Galactic History database sent that distress call. Every single one died alone. She paused, letting that sink in. But not anymore. The war's nature changed overnight. It wasn't about defense anymore. This was about justice for the dead and vengeance for the defenseless. New mission parameters, Yang announced. Total extermination. No harvester will survive this war. No slave world will remain under their control. The military transformation was swift and brutal. Commander Lim Tae-hoon developed biological weapons that turned harvester technology against itself. His viruses didn't just kill. They made the bioships suffer, tearing themselves apart at the cellular level. They need to feel pain, Tae-hoon explained to his concerned subordinates. For every species they destroyed, for every child they enslaved, psychological operations specialist Han Minji created something even more terrifying. Neural warfare that attacked the harvesters' collective consciousness directly. Her weapons could drive entire fleets insane, making them turn on each other, in confusion and madness. The perfect weapon, she said with satisfaction, is one that makes your enemy destroy themselves. The hunting parties began immediately. Captain Jo Won-young led the first deep strike mission, using new stealth technology, to penetrate harvester space. Her targets weren't military installations, they were the slave worlds. We're not just fighting an army, Won-young told her crew. We're fighting an entire system. Every slave world, every processing center, every breeding facility must be found and eliminated. The rescued slaves told horrific stories. Species that had been kept alive for centuries, bred like cattle, used as living tools. Some begged to die rather than remember what they'd endured, but others wanted revenge. Fight with us, urged Commander Park Sung-jin, recruiting from the freed populations. Help us make sure this never happens again. The aliens who joined humanity brought their own knowledge of harvester weaknesses. They knew the locations of hidden bases, the patterns of the hunting fleets, the weaknesses in bioship designs. Together, they formed hunting packs that stalked across the galaxy. The harvesters had never faced this kind of warfare. Throughout their history, they'd been the hunters. Now they were prey. Colonel Choi Dae-un specialized in psychological warfare. Her fleet would appear, destroy a harvester outpost, and leave messages. You cannot run. You cannot hide. We will find every last one of you. The messages worked. Harvester formations began showing signs of paranoia. They started attacking empty space, seeing human ships that weren't there. Their coordination faltered as fear infected their hive mind. Fear is a weapon, Dae-un explained, and we're very good at using it. Admiral Kwon Mi-hyun commanded Operation Deep Strike, humanity's push into the dark heart of harvester space. What they found there defied comprehension. Worlds turned into massive organic factories. Entire solar systems converted into harvester breeding grounds. The corpses of civilizations used as raw materials for their empire. How many? Asked Commander Lee Ji-young, staring at the sensor readings. Thousands of civilizations, came the reply. Maybe tens of thousands, all reduced to this. The rage that followed transformed humanity once again. They became something that scared even their allies. Captain Yoon Sulgi developed planet cracker weapons, not to destroy worlds, but to free them. Her ships could split harvester breeding planets in half, exposing their horrific organic interiors to space. Every world they've touched must be cleansed, she declared, even if that means destroying them completely. The hunt became systematic. Human fleets created a net across the galaxy, closing in on every harvester stronghold. They used tactics that would have horrified their peaceful ancestors. Biological warfare, psychological torture, and most frightening of all, the complete refusal to accept surrender. They showed no mercy to the civilizations they destroyed, General Park Ji-hoon explained to his officers. Why should we show mercy to them? The galaxy watched in awe and terror as humanity pursued their enemies across light years. Other species began to fear what humans had become almost as much as they'd feared the harvesters. Ancient civilizations observed from their hidden refuges, whispering among themselves, The humans aren't just winning. They're becoming something worse than what they fight. But humanity didn't care anymore. They had a job to finish. The hunt continued, relentless and merciless. Every day brought news of another harvester stronghold found, another slave world freed, another breeding facility destroyed. The harvesters were finally learning what their victims had felt. Helpless terror as death approached from the darkness. And death had a human face. 63 years. That's how long the war lasted in total. Commander Ryu Won-young stood in the ruins of the last harvester stronghold, her boots crushing organic debris that still twitched with fading life. The final hive was dead. Mission complete, she radioed, to the fleet above. The galaxy is secure. Dr. Lee Sana, now over 100 years old thanks to military life extension technology, sat in her wheelchair at the memorial garden on Earth. The statue before her honored the unknown aliens who had sent that first distress call, the signal that changed everything. We answered, she whispered to the carved stone. We finally answered, but the victory felt hollow. The woman who had decoded that first message barely recognized the species humanity had become. Supreme Admiral Yang Hana, promoted through decades of war, reviewed the final casualty reports. Humanity had won, but the cost was staggering. 30 billion humans dead, hundreds of worlds scarred by warfare, an entire generation that knew nothing but combat. More disturbing were the psychological profiles, soldiers who felt empty without enemies to kill, children who drew pictures of weapons instead of flowers, scientists who could only think in terms of destruction. What have we become? Yang asked her aide, looking out at the victory celebrations. Below, the freed slaves gathered at monuments across the galaxy. Millions of beings from dozens of species, finally free after centuries of torment. They called humans their saviors, built shrines to human courage, but they also whispered among themselves about human cruelty, about weapons that made even the harvesters look merciful, about a species that had become something terrifying in order to save others. Fleet Admiral Park Doyen, promoted from his days as a bridge captain, announced the formation of the Galactic Protection Force. Humanity will guard the peace we fought so hard to achieve, he declared. The message was clear to every species in the galaxy. Humanity was in charge now. The reconstruction began immediately. Human engineering crews spread across liberated worlds, rebuilding what the harvesters had destroyed. But they also built military bases, weapons platforms, and monitoring stations. We're not making the same mistake our ancestors did, explained General Choi Hyun-soo during a planning meeting. We were weak because we believed in peace. Never again. The cultural changes were the most disturbing. Human art became obsessed with war. Music celebrated battle. Literature glorified sacrifice for the greater good. Children's shows featured cartoon soldiers defeating aliens. Peace itself became suspicious. When a group of artists created a sculpture celebrating harmony, protesters tore it down. Weakness, they chanted. We must stay strong. Professor Kim Nayeon tried to document the transformation in her book, The Price of Victory. The government banned it before publication. This information could damage morale, the censors explained. People need to remember why we fought, but some remembered too well. Captain Nam Min-hyun, hero of 17 battles, suffered from what doctors called victory sickness. He would wake up screaming about imaginary harvesters, reaching for weapons that weren't there. The war's over, his wife would say. No, he'd reply, eyes focused on something she couldn't see. It never ends. The alien species that survived the Harvester Wars watched humanity with growing unease. Yes, humans had saved them. But at what cost? During a Galactic Council meeting, the Veltai representative spoke carefully. We are grateful for our freedom, but we wonder, is this the future our ancestors imagined when they called for help? Ambassador Song Ariam, now Earth's primary diplomatic representative, smiled coldly. Your ancestors are free. That's what matters. The conversation that followed spoke volumes about what humanity had become. Children born after the war grew up in a militarized society. They learned tactical thinking in elementary school. High school graduation required military service. Universities focused on weapons research and strategic studies. Dr. Bei Yujin, the scientist who had developed many of humanity's war-winning technologies, tried to refocus research on peaceful applications. She was quietly transferred to a monitoring position. "We can't trust anyone who doesn't understand the eternal threat," her replacement explained. The galaxy settled into an uncomfortable peace. Human fleets patrolled every system. Human weapons guarded every trade route. Human colonies expanded into former harvester territory. Other species learned to be careful around humans. Those who questioned human methods too loudly tended to face economic sanctions, military patrols near their systems, or mysterious technical malfunctions in their equipment. Fear kept the peace. Late at night, in secure government facilities, some leaders wondered if they'd won the war but lost their souls. Admiral Yang Hana, in her final years, wrote in her private journal, "We became monsters to fight monsters. The children learn our ways, but they don't understand what we sacrificed. They see strength where we see emptiness." The final chapter of the war was written not in battle but in silence. As the last generation who remembered peaceful humanity died off, their warnings were forgotten. The galaxy had new guardians now, protectors who would never let another species suffer as they had, defenders who would strike first to prevent future threats. The aliens had called for help against monsters. They got their wish. The monsters were gone. In their place stood something that scared even the demons. Humanity had answered the call. They had saved the galaxy, and they would never let anyone forget the price of that salvation. The silence was broken. The darkness was lifted, but sometimes the light that drives away shadows becomes so bright it burns. The SOS had been answered, the response echoed across eternity, and the galaxy learned to sleep with one eye open.